So you've just started Albion and are a little lost. Well, you've come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of Albion, some important mechanics of the game, and show you how to get started with your adventure. The first thing to do in Albion is get yourself set up in one of the royal cities. When you come off of Tutorial Island, you choose a town to start in, but that is just a beginner town. Most of the action happens around the royal cities, which are deeper mainland in the royal continent. To find the royal city closest to you, open up the map and look a little bit deeper into the continent towards the center. You should see a zone with what looks something like a castle covering it that has a colored light shooting up from it. Here is the chart with the starter towns and the associated royal city that they are closest to. Now, before you pack up and leave, know that banks in Albion are not connected. What you store in the bank of one town will not appear in the bank of another town. So before you leave, make sure you grab your important items and take them with you. All royal cities are basically the same. They all have the same things inside of them. The only differences are when it comes to gathering, crafting, and refining, which I'll go over now. If you're not planning on doing these activities until later, just skip to the next chapter of the video. The main difference in cities is their crafting bonuses. Basically, each city gives you a slight bonus when crafting or refining certain items. To check what bonus is in any given city, either open up the cluster map while inside of the city and press down on this drop-down menu on the top right, or open up the big map, find the city, and then click on the ground of that zone beside the castle thing to open up the same thing. If you're planning on crafting or refining certain items that you already have in mind, you may want to make your way to a city that has the bonuses for it. The other big difference in royal cities comes in the zones that are surrounding them. Each zone in Albion is one of 5 biomes: forest, highland, mountain, steppe, and swamp. The biggest differences in these biomes, besides their looks, is the types of resources that can be found in them. Each biome has 3 resources that can be found there: a primary resource, a secondary, and a tertiary. Here is a chart of what resources can be found in each. A biome's primary resource can be found plentifully, secondary resource commonly, and tertiary resource rarely. If you plan to gather a specific resource, you may want to choose a town that has that resource available in the zones around it. Knowing these differences, you may want to move to a different city. I'm going to Thetford as we'll be using it to gather and craft later on. If you want to follow along, feel free to go there as well. To get to a different city safely, you can fast travel from city to city by going to the travel planner. Just open up the cluster map in cities and look for this navigation marker. From this, you can move to any other royal city. However, if you want to bring any items with you, you will have to pay a silver cost for each one. So you can either leave your items in the bank for later, sell your items, or instead of fast traveling, travel by foot going along the outside of the royal continent. If you travel by foot, make sure not to enter any red zones, which we'll dive deeper into later on. So you set up in a royal city, now what? Well, Albion has a lot of different activities for you to do, so let's go over some that are good for newer players to get their start. One of the most important things to do early is to do some PvE combat to level up your character. There are 2 good ways to do this: solo dungeons and open world mobs. For solo dungeons, if you go out into a zone, you will sometimes see these rocks with a green glow. These are solo dungeons. If you click onto them, you will channel inside and enter the dungeon, which is a linear path full of mobs, bosses, and treasure chests. These are a great way to get familiar with combat and start fame farming to level up your character. Alternatively, you could roam the open world and kill the mobs that hang around there. While there are no chests to get from doing this, these mobs drop a good amount of silver and occasionally drop items as well. Something new players sometimes worry about is having the right build for combat, but don't worry too much about this. Solo dungeons and mobs were designed to be able to be killed by someone with any build. If you are having trouble or want a particularly good build, check out one of my beginner build videos. Now, in order to do these combat activities effectively, you need to make sure you are killing the right tier of mobs. which means you need to be in the right tier of zone. Many things in Albion work on a tier system. Zones are one of them. Zones range from tier 3 to tier 8, with tier 3 being the lowest, weakest, and least valuable, to tier 8 being the highest, strongest, and most valuable. Typically, zones have mobs and resources according to their tier. For mobs, they will almost always be the same tier as the zones they are found in, whether they are out in the open world or inside a dungeon. For example, in a tier 5 zone, you would find tier 5 mobs. To figure out what tier of mobs you should be killing and what tier of zone you should be playing in and doing these combat activities, you need to know what level your Reaver is. Your Reaver level can be found in your Destiny board as the very left line out from the center. Reaver increases the damage that you do to mobs and decreases the damage that you take from them up to a certain tier. Thus, it is a very important part of your strength. So when deciding what zone to go to, you want to make sure that you are not going to a zone with a higher tier than your current tier of Reaver. For example, you can see that my Reaver is currently Adept Reaver, which gives me the bonus up to tier 4 of mobs, so I should stay in a tier 4 zone. If I go to a tier 5 zone, I will not have the Expert's Reaver yet, which gives me the tier 5 bonus, so I will struggle killing those mobs. If you want to explore higher tier zones, you can level up your Reaver by gaining any combat fame. So by killing some mobs in a lower tier zone, you'll be able to level up your Reaver and be able to easier kill mobs in a higher tier one. To figure out what tier a zone is, open up the map and it will appear as a Roman numeral number next to the zone name and color. Combat is one of the best ways to start out playing Albion. You get familiar with the game's mechanics, level up your character to become stronger, and it's one of the best ways to make money early on. I would highly suggest focusing on solo dungeons and open world mob killing early on in your adventure. If you are more interested in the economy, gathering, refining, and crafting parts of Albion, these can make some good beginner activities as well. For example, you could try making yourself a set of gear. Let's go over that process by examining how to make a nature staff. If you want to follow along, just know that you will need to have leveled up your crafting of hunter items up to this tier 3 node here, and the refining node up to the tier 3 here as well. When figuring out what you need for crafting, it's easiest to start with the item and work backwards. A journeyman's nature staff is made with tier 3 planks and tier 3 cloth. These are refined materials, and if you click on them, you can see what they are made of, which in this case is tier 2 and 3 wood and tier 2 and 3 fiber. So the first step would be to gather the wood and fiber. To gather them, the only thing we need is a tier 2 novice's axe for wood and a tier 2 novice's sickle for fiber, as you can gather resources one tier above the tier of your tool. If you don't have these, you can either buy them off the market pretty cheaply or make them very easily at a tool maker. When it comes to finding these resources, we need to learn a little bit more about zones. Remember how every zone has a tier, and that tier signals what tier of mobs can be found in them? Well, it also determines what tier of resources can be found in them. Resources usually spawn up to the zone tier. For example, a tier 6 zone will have resources up to tier 6, but not above. If you are ever wondering exactly what resources you will be able to find in a zone, open its cluster map by clicking on it in the world map, and at the top right you will see which resources are there and the tiers available. Now, as we explored earlier, different zones are different biomes, and different biomes have different types of resources in them. Since we need wood and fiber, a good biome to go to would be a swamp zone biome that has both of them. After we gather some wood and fiber, it's time to refine them into planks and cloth. Now remember, each city has a refining bonus. For wood, it is in Fort Sterling, and for fiber, it is in Lyndhurst. However, bringing all of these materials around the world for a little bit of a bonus typically isn't worth it, so let's just do the refining in Thetford since it's close by. To refine these materials, we need to find a lumber mill for the wood and a weaver for the cloth. So when you're in the city, open up the cluster map and look for their respective icons. Now each of these stations in the city are owned by real players who can set the prices at whatever they want. so it can be a good idea to look for the cheapest one. An easy way to do this is to find one and click on it, which will highlight all the other stations of that type. When you're looking at the price, make sure to look at the usage fee for users and not associates. After we have refined all of our materials, it is time for the last step, which is to craft our nature staff. Luckily for us, Thetford is the city which gives a crafting bonus to nature staves, so we'll get that crafting bonus without having to move anywhere. Nature staves are crafted at the Hunter's Lodge, so use the same process as refining to find a cheap station and finish crafting your nature staff. Each of these steps, gathering, refining, and crafting, can be done individually as an activity. You don't have to go through the whole process of doing them together like this. In fact, many experienced players choose to specialize in one. Gathering is typically slow early on, and you will make minimal profits, but once you get leveled up to the high tiers of gathering, it can be very profitable. Refining usually has some profits, although often relies on using focus, which you will need premium for. Crafting is often the least accessible for a newer player, being slow to start and relying on having focus and premium to make profits. Now, notably, if you're playing on the Albion East server, gathering, refining, and crafting will be much different than on a very old server like Albion West, and could have potential for some pretty decent profit, even for beginners if you can find the right items. If you are like many players, you may have started Albion for the PvP. Luckily, there are some activities for new players to help you get into PvP, such as arenas and corrupted dungeons. For both of these, you will need to make sure you reached tier 4 on your set of gear. So if you're not quite there yet, spend a little more time doing some combat and then come back to this. Corrupted dungeons are very similar to solo dungeons in that they can be found out anywhere in the open world. They look very similar to solo dungeons, being in a rock formation, except instead of a green light, there is a red one, and the rocks have some demonic inscribings on them. When you enter, there is a totem which you can click on to channel and be more likely to get to a PvP fight. Otherwise, the dungeon is similar to a solo dungeon with bosses, mobs, and treasure chests. Arenas can be accessed via the activities menu at the top right hand corner. These are a 5v5 PvP arena with some silver and fame rewards for winning. I would suggest doing some other activity while you queue for arenas, as if you're not a healer, queue times can get pretty long depending on the time of day. So once you've done some of these activities for a little while and are feeling more comfortable with how the game works, it's time to start really getting out there and progressing throughout the game. The main way to do this is to adventure further out into the world, going into the more dangerous and higher tier zones for their better rewards. So let's take a closer look at the different types of zones. There are 4 types of zones in Albion, identified by a unique color: blue, yellow, red, and black. Blue zones are the beginner zones you start out in. They have low rewards but are completely safe as PvP is disabled. Yellow zones have PvP, but it is knockdown only PvP, so if you die, you only lose a little bit of durability on your gear, which is not a big deal. Additionally, in order for players to PvP, they have to turn into a hostile status and get punished for killing other players. Because of this, not many players PvP in yellow zones, so they often play out very similar to blue zones. Blue and yellow zones can be found nearby royal cities. Red zones are where the full loot PvP starts. All gear is lost on death. However, in order to attack another player in the red zones, one must first hard flag by clicking the shield next to their health bar in the top left corner. This has a long channel time and will turn their health bar red for other players, indicating their hostile status. If a hostile player kills someone in the red zone, they will lose some reputation. Lose too much reputation and they will not be allowed to enter certain zones and could even lock themselves into the black zone for some time. Additionally, there is a hostile player counter that appears near the minimap of the bottom right corner of the screen that shows how many hostile players are currently in the zone. So in order to help stay safe in the red zone, make sure to constantly check this hostile counter and stay far away from anyone with a red health bar. Red zones are found within the middle of the Royal Continent, around the city of Caerleon. Lastly, black zones are the most dangerous zones in Albion. Anybody can attack anybody, and all gear is lost on death. There is also no hostile counter, so you never know how many aggressive players are around in the zone. Black zones are found on their own unique continent, accessed through a city's realm gate or through the roads of Avalon. Because of these varying levels of danger, different types of zones have different rewards, with the dangerous zones being more rewarding. Each type of zone has a different fame and loot multiplier, which you can see here on screen. So for example, let's say you kill a mob with 1000 base fame, that drops 100 base silver. In the blue zone, you would receive 2150 fame and 125 silver. In the black zone, you would receive 4200 fame and 260 silver. As such, it is recommended to head into the red and black zones as soon as you'll feel ready, as the rewards are so much higher. To identify what type or color of a zone, either open up the world map and it will show as a colored icon along with the map name, or if you are in the map, there will be a colored icon on the bottom right corner next to the minimap, or if you open your cluster map, it will show at the top left corner. Blue, yellow, and red zones are only in the Royal Continent and around Brasilian, and black zones are only in the Outlands, Avalonian roads, or instanced areas such as Hellgates or corrupted dungeons. So my suggestion would be that once you are familiar with the game and have played in the blue and yellow zones for a while, that you start to explore the red and black zones. Now remember, the number one rule of red and black zones is never take anything that you aren't willing to lose. So make sure you've made enough money to be able to comfortably afford losing a set of gear, and go head out to the red or black zones to do your favorite activity. I'll also note here that if you subscribe to the channel, there is a guide coming soon on how to stay safe in the red and black zones of Albion to help you get your feet wet with these risky but valuable zones. Okay, and those are the most important things to know as a beginner in Albion Online. I hope you found this video helpful or enjoying. If you did, do all of the stuff you do to YouTube videos, and I'll see you in the next one.